This podcast was produced by OAR FM Dunedin with support from New Zealand On the Air.
The Science Notes podcast on OAR FM Dunedin, brought to you by the Division of Sciences at the University of Otago. I'm Dave McMorrin. Over the next half hour, I'll be chatting with a graduate science student about their research, their passion for science, and the things that fuel their creativity. Well, hello and welcome to another episode of Science Notes. My name's Dave McMorrin, and this time our guest is Jacqueline Theis. Did I get that right?
Yes, you did. Kia ora.
Thank you for coming along on a sunny, if brisk, spring morning in Dunedin.
Yeah, that's right. Thanks for having me.
No, you're very welcome. Jacqueline's doing a PhD in zoology.
Yes, ecology.
Is it ecology officially?
Yeah.
But that ecology is kind of part of
Correct.
zoology.
Yeah, it's part of zoology.
Right. So you just got a new building. Are you in the new building? Well, new quote-unquote building.
My office is in the old building.
Yes.
Quite charming.
But some people have now been moved to the annex.
Yeah, that's right.
So how far through your PhD are you?
I have about 10 months to go, so not too much longer.
So we're well into it then.
Yes.
Yeah. Writing.
Yes, pretty much.
The
now
best
the writing
part.
phase. I still have a lot of lab work to do, but, getting there.
Yeah. So how then, whereabouts have you come from that you find yourself in the ecology department at Otago doing a PhD?
Well, I originally actually worked in mental health. I was really interested in that human-nature connection, even when I lived in Germany. So I worked in mental health in Germany and in New Zealand. But my parents really ingrained that passion for nature in me. And I was really always very keen of the conservation for our native species. I feel very much like home here in New Zealand and care for the environment here. And I studied ecology and psychology as my undergrad.
Right.
And then went
in
on
Germany?
In Dunedin.
Oh, in Dunedin,
yeah.
sorry, yep.
And then went on to do a postgrad diploma in wildlife management.
Mm-hmm.
And then jumped into the PhD ecology. So now I'm in the urban ecology space, which I just feel so lucky because it marries the both passions of mine to create better urban living for humans while at the same time conserving native species.
It makes sense, I suppose, that from a mental health perspective, being able to live somewhere where there's lots of birds and nature and stuff is potentially good for that.
Yeah, absolutely. There is so much research out there that clearly shows that living in biodiverse environment and green environments is so good for our mental and physical well-being, from immunoregulation to a decrease in mental health disorders and cardiovascular diseases. The list goes on and on. And actually a recent survey in Australia showed that having that connection to nature was actually deemed as important as income in determining life satisfaction.
And I suppose that's, at least on the surface, why a lot of people think they want to come and live in New Zealand, because they perceive that that's kind of a big part of what living here is like. It's not just about the money, it's about the lifestyle and the nature and the
absolutely
creatures and things.
Yeah, I think New Zealand is perceived as a very green country, right? However, in urban areas, we can still do better.
Yeah, and that's the thing. And this is the kind of your focus in the urban thing, is that as we are increasingly trying to build more and more houses and potentially less and less space, some things have to give, and the nature perhaps is one of the first things that goes.
Yes. So ultimately, around nearly 87% of New Zealand's population live in cities. So that's really the space where we can experience and interact with nature. But, over the recent decades, really, the standalone home with private garden is increasingly replaced by medium density housing.
Yeah.
And so the green space is diminishing. But there's no reason why denser environments can't be greener too. It's absolutely possible.
You just have to build it into the design.
Correct.
And make it a priority.
Yeah.
Your PhD is through something called, and I have to confess I had not heard about this until half an hour ago, the People, Cities and Nature Research Program, which is funded by MB, so that's government funding in New Zealand, but also I just discovered it's also Australia and New Zealand.
Yes.
There's some aspects of it that people in Australia are doing as well.
Yes, that's correct. So there are 4 big research teams within People, Cities and Nature. One focuses on restoration and incorporation of Mataranga Mari. One team focuses on soil enhancing health, and that's the team that's based in Australia. So there are lots of researchers working on that.
Right.
There's one team on increasing urban wildlife. There, the team members are mostly based in Wellington.
So that's the Zealandia people and stuff.
No,
No?
actually, we have a couple of people from Zealandia in our team, which is the
right.
residential design for biodiversity team.
Okay, right.
So Danielle, who's the CEO of Zealandia, is part of our team, and my supervisor, Yolanda van Heesek. Then there's Maybridge, she's based at the AUT, focusing on sustainable architecture, and Claire Freeman focusing on people-environment relations. But in terms of urban wildlife, one of our team members who was based at Zealandia, he kind of, jumps around a little bit within the other teams. So, super varied team members, a lot of expertise within People, Cities, Nature. It's a really awesome research program.
And it's been going for a while.
Yes, it has been. Yeah. So I think they received 2 contracts so far.
I mean, that's good. I mean, it's easy to get a bit
excellent.
cynical about government funding for programs extending for too far into too long these days, but that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's been really successful.
Cool. So then your particular aspect of the work is what?
So I'm focusing on how we can boost biodiversity in urban areas. And to this end, I've created, together with the team, of course, the New Zealand Biodiversity Factor, which is a suite of Excel-based tools to assess the biodiversity value of residential, industrial, transport, and building developments. So the end user can use their development plans and landscape plans and basically enter data into that tool to receive a biodiversity score out of 100 and tailored recommendations how to increase biodiversity in ecologically meaningful ways. Currently, there are no policies at all relating to biodiversity inclusion in urban design. So at the moment, it's really up to the developer whether they want to include biodiversity or not. But it definitely shows that there are no policies because a lot of the medium density housing is dominated by grey non-permeable space. And, the professionals working in that space, they have no guidance how to incorporate biodiversity.
Yeah.
And ultimately, they don't have to.
Yeah. So ideally, there'd be a policy that says for a new development, your score needs to be 63 or higher or something.
Something like that, yeah. Yeah, or at least to use the tool before and after the development to see if there was, a decrease or increase or whether the score roughly maintained the same in terms of biodiversity. Just to use the tool, I think, would be great because there's a lot of educational content within the tool as well to point out what can be done.
It's interesting. My wife and I lived in Christchurch a long time ago now. And we were involved in putting a new house out in Spencer Park, which is out near the beach. And as a part of that, and the garage that we put there, the council required that we put in a planting plan so that we were basically going to hide all these new buildings from the road. And so we had to do that from a council point of view.
Yeah, interesting.
So those sorts of things do perhaps exist in places.
Yes, yeah. I think it's also, as you say, council dependent as well, or on the region.
So then, biodiversity. Maybe we should define what that is from your perspective. It's a word that you see all over the place these days. Presumably, it's more in a contextual sense. It's more than just having lots of birds and plants. It's also about what birds and plants you have. Yeah,
correct. So, very broadly speaking, it's just the variety of life.
Yeah,
you want lots of variety of genes, variety of species, both fauna and flora, so animals and plants, genetic variety. I always think of the ecosystem as a whole like a really massive machine. And, the machine, the ecosystem, can only run if there are all these cables plugged in. And each cable represents a species, be it an animal or a plant. But most of these cables, so most species in the world, are actually represented by animals, specifically insects. And we need a variety of these species to keep the ecosystem running. So it's the interaction of those that's really important. That's basically what biodiversity entails. And, the more you pull these cables out, the more the machine starts to play up. So the ecosystem is unbalanced. And that's what we focus on as well, to make sure that there's a variety of things present in especially residential spaces and city centres.
And I suppose, too, to continue with your analogy, if you don't know what you're doing, pulling a cable or cutting a cable randomly in a machine might have the effect that you think, but it might also have 5 other effects that you didn't realise because you don't really understand how the machine works. And so losing one part of the system, be it an insect or whatever, can have consequences that you don't really
absolutely
assume. You can't assume that you can understand.
Yeah.
So in a Dunedin, so your research site then is in Dunedin.
Yes, so there are 2 parts to my PhD. So one part is, creating these assessment tools. And that's really desk-based work. So I assessed quite a few developments in Auckland via desk work, which was great.
So this is you going to the developer and saying, can we be involved?
Yes, correct. And so far, 2 of New Zealand's development companies have trialed the New Zealand biodiversity factor, and they made changes to their landscape plans to boost biodiversity, which was really encouraging.
Cool.
We are planning to launch all the tools by the start of next year. They will be available for free for end users to use, so there will be a launch coming. And one of our team members, Maybrit, is actually creating a design for biodiversity tool. So that's just a website that gives you really good ideas what can be done, and with some case studies. So so that's one part of my PhD. The other part focuses on insects, specifically the George Street planters here in Dunedin, because we want to find out how well these small, greenery projects like streetside planters truly work for biodiversity.
Assuming that there are some people listening who don't live in Dunedin and don't know about the George Street planters, tell us about the George Street redevelopment and the place that the planters have in those.
Yeah, sure. So George Street is the main shopping street here in Dunedin, and it was originally completely paved, and they made the decision to make it aesthetically more pleasing, to incorporate a lot of streetside planters with a variety of vegetation in it and lots of seating area around it. They also worked together with Okaha, which is a local company that makes sure that you incorporate mana whenua values into urban design, which has been a really fantastic outcome. And the DCC, Dunedin City Council, clearly stated they want to increase biodiversity in our city centre. And my supervisors, Barbara Barrett and Yolanda Van Heesek, and we got really excited when we read that, because it's not the norm for councils to clearly state such a goal.
Yep.
So, of course, we had to go in and research if these planters truly support biodiversity.
Yeah. I should also point out that, in some ways the driver was really replacing all the water infrastructure, wasn't it, in the middle of town?
Yes, that was one of the goals as well.
But they could have just dug up all the pipes, replaced them, and then put asphalt down again.
Yeah.
But they didn't.
They could have.
Exactly. And what's ended up with is great. It's amazing. In fact, I was walking through town yesterday and listened to some people ahead of me that going on about how amazing it was. So they're obviously from out of town and really impressed. So
yeah, it's really beautiful.
Yeah, no, it is. And so all the way dotted along the main street then, which is now just one way to make more room for these things, there's these big sort of gardens full of plants. And I remember when they first were planted out and you'd walk along, there was these little signs that kind of indicated that there were the plants were there to try and encourage insects and bugs and stuff, and that people were looking for them. And so that was you.
Yes, yeah. That was my study. Yeah, so what I said to find out really is what kind of insects are colonizing these planters, how do the communities change over time in these planters, and how do the insect communities along George Street differ from the more natural sites in Dunedin. I want to find out what drives insect colonization, and I focus on insect, as I've explained. They are the little things that keep the world running.
Yeah.
They are incredibly good indicators for ecosystem health. So the more variety of insects we find in these planters, the more likely it is that these planters function as a really well-functioning little ecosystem.
Yeah. I mean, it seems to me there was always a risk that you go to the trouble of building all of these things in the middle of town and then they all die. And that's kind of undoing all the good things and perhaps even making it worse in the centre of lots of buildings and everything, just have lots of dead plants everywhere. But they do seem to be going really well. So was the plants that were put in planted with a view to supporting the insects?
Yes, actually their plan clearly showed which plants were put in for what reason, for which species. So they have some plants that produce berries. They have some plants that birds really like, and they have a lot of plants that are flowering species to attract pollinators. They really thought about it very carefully, and they create somewhat a pollination pathway. So in other terms, they always have some kind of plant on George Street that's flowering. So there are flowering plants present all year round,
right,
which is really fantastic. There are lots of ground covers present. Obviously, insects love ground covers. And they have about 3,000 plants planted from roughly 60 different species, most of which are native, which is really good. So especially in urban areas, you do want to encourage the planting of native vegetation because our native wildlife has co-evolved with native vegetation, so it's super important.
This is one thing I suppose that becomes an issue, is that if you want to encourage people to be doing more planting around residential areas and developments and stuff, ideally you'd want natives because that's going to support the insects and stuff, but they don't tend to be as pretty as roses and rhododendrons and such. So there's presumably some sort of tension there.
Yeah, I mean, I'm biased. I love native vegetation. And we do actually have a lot of native plants that do flower really beautifully. I mean, some hebe varieties produce these beautiful flowers. We have kofi and so on. But I mean, exotic vegetation is still important. It still ticks boxes in terms of biodiversity enhancement. They are even native, native species that use these exotic plants. But you should still make sure to have mostly native vegetation on your property. I mean, I'm the same. I love flowers. I have bulbs in my garden or, everywhere. But yeah, I do make sure to have mostly native vegetation. And the other thing that's really important that the DCC has done really well with these planters is that the plants are layered really well. So the vegetation heights are really important. You want to make sure that you have some kind of ground cover. And then maybe a vegetation up to 30 centimeters of height, then up to 2 meters. If you manage to put in a tree or a tall shrub as well, that's fantastic, because the more height categories you have available in any given spot, the more habitat becomes available.
So how then do you ascertain the health of the insect community in the thing? Is it down on your knees finding them and counting them and stuff, or?
Yeah, so it's actually quite hard to find insects. But so what I do is I install traps. So what I've done is I stored in traps. So it's basically a cup filled with dishwashing liquid and water. It's level with the ground, and the insects go along the ground, fall into my cup, and drown, so I can take them with me to the... Yeah, I know. It's a bit sad, but yeah, so I can take them with me.
It's for science, though.
It's science, yeah. So I can take them with me into the lab and identify them under the microscope. Because what I'm doing is I identify each insect to the order. So basically, is it a fly? Is it a spider? Is it a beetle? But for beetles, I identify them to the species level because we have a lot of native and exotic beetles. Some of them disperse via flying, some crawl, some are herbivores, then we have fungivores and carnivores. So depending on the beetle species that I find, I can get a really good idea of what the ecosystem is like. And unfortunately, the only way to identify a beetle is with the microscope. So I I also vacuum plants. I was stopped by many residents here to ask why the DCC is using taxpayers' money to get the plants cleaned. I promise you that was not the case. So I vacuum plants to see what kind of bugs hang out in them as well. And I do have 5 study sites. So I have George Street, which is the most disturbed site. There's lots of foot traffic and car traffic obviously as well. Then I have a look at the communities on the university, Ross Creek, Town Belt. Town Belt is quite close to George Street geographically. And then Woodside, which serves as a pristine native condition.
So how then is the George Street communities comparing?
So overall, I do find quite a lot of insects, which surprised me, to be honest. I thought it would take a little longer.
Because it's only been 2 years?
Yeah, a little over 2 years, yeah. So the planters were put in consecutively. So there are 3 blocks. So at first the first block was put in, then the second, then the third. Now some insects would have come in with the soil, for example, slugs. Some insects may have hitchhiked with the plants. But a lot of insects have come in by themselves. I do find flies and all that stuff. Now, flies and native wasps, they obviously disperse via flying. And what I found was really amazing was that we found a ground-dwelling predator beetle in one of the planters. And it didn't occur right away, so it must have crawled its way into the planters by itself and created its own repopulation, which I thought was really fantastic.
I suppose that's a good sign, though.
Yeah.
If the predators are setting up home, there must be food for them.
Exactly. So. And in terms of how the communities on George Street compare to the other communities, they are quite different to the other communities, but that's totally to be expected. After all, urban areas are quite a harsh environment. Yeah. They will attract slightly different insects, but over time and as the vegetation matures, we can expect them to overlap a little bit more with the more natural sites. And that's something we see on the university communities. They are quite different to the natural sites still, but there's more overlap with the natural sites when compared with George Street. So over time, we believe that will happen. So ideally, someone comes in and does a follow-up survey in a few years.
We're running out of time. So you said that you're 2 and a bit years in to your 3 years.
Yes, yeah.
So writing up now, data collection.
Yeah, so my data collection is all done. I'm still in the lab identifying a few more insects. That will take me another month or so, and then it's the write-up phase.
And then?
Well, very hopefully I'll be doing a postdoc. I do want to end up in academia. I love outreach. I love teaching. I love giving talks. I love research. So, it would tick all my boxes to stay in urban ecology and academia.
And and that would be in Dunedin?
Ideally, I stay in Dunedin. I love Dunedin. But, we'll see where life takes me, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, does the program have money, support funding for postdocs?
If the contract was to extend, maybe, possibly, it would be cool to look into how to integrate the tools into policies. But we'll see what happens.
Okay. Well, thank you for coming in and telling us about what you've been up to.
Cool. Thank you so much for having me.
And it's nice to hear the other side of what's been happening with the stuff in the middle of the city.
Yeah.
And nice to know that there's been so much sort of thinking behind. I mean, I think there's a lot of thinking behind the whole thing from my perspective as a non-specialist, but I think they've done really well with how they've designed it and laid it out. And even though there was a lot of pushback, and there's probably still a lot of pushback, it's really good. So all the best for whatever's next and for the writing up. And thank you for coming along. And thank you everyone out there for listening. We'll catch you next time. You've been listening to the Science Notes podcast, brought to you by the Division of Sciences at the University of Otago. To listen again or to find other episodes in this series, go to Otago Access Radio's website, oar.org.nz, or to your favourite podcast platform.
This podcast was produced by OAR FM Dunedin with support from New Zealand On the Air.